today NATO started deploying ships to the Aegean Sea to stop smugglers taking Syrian migrants from Turkey to Greece. And thousands of people are fleeing Syria right now, where fighting rages this week in the city of Aleppo. ISIS has complicated the battlefield, and the U.S. is leading the mission to defeat the militant group there. In fact, it was a year ago today that President Obama formally asked Congress to approve the use of force. So far, Congress has yet to vote on that. Senator Jeff Flake is a Republican from Arizona, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Flake, welcome back to Here and Now.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, why hasn't this happened yet?
You know, I don't know. I think that Congress is shirking its responsibility here. We need to provide the president the authority to undertake this campaign against ISIS. I think our allies need to hear it. Our adversaries certainly do. And we need to speak with one voice.
Well, the Republicans control Congress. Is there a faction in the party that doesn't want this to happen, that doesn't want the authorization for the use of military force against ISIS?
There's a faction of Republicans who doesn't believe that the president needs the authority at all, and then some who believe that he needs it but doesn't want to give him anything but full-throated authority to do whatever he would like to. Then you have some Democrats as well who don't want to give the president too much authority, for example, to use ground troops. And so it's not just one party. It's both parties seem to have a particular problem with carrying through on this.
Well, and the original authorization for use of military force, which he has been using, and the legal experts say this works in the fight against ISIS because it's an offshoot of al-Qaeda. Right. But the original authorization actually specifically says that the president has the authority to go after those, to use force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001. Now, the ISIS fighters of today, probably the vast majority of them, had nothing to do with that.
Well, I would certainly maintain that. And even if the president does have the authority, because ISIS, I think we all accept, is an outgrowth of al-Qaeda, it still, Congress should act. The troops need to hear it. Our own troops, and certainly our allies and our adversaries need to hear it as well.
Would you support a large number of U.S. boots on the ground in Syria?
I think that we ought to wait until our commanders think that. I myself don't believe that that would be particularly useful at this time, and neither do our commanders on the ground or the administration. But I don't think that the authorization ought to rule that out. And what I and my colleague Tim Kaine have put together in this bipartisan AUMF is something that doesn't limit the president's authority or the geography in terms of the use of force. But it does have a section which deals with what we call purpose language. And in there we say that, the purpose is to defeat ISIS, and we don't believe that this should require the use of ground troops. So that's how we kind of saddled the difference, and I think we're going to have language like that if we want it to be a bipartisan product, and it needs to be.
But what do you do about a situation like what we're seeing right now in Syria, where you've got tens of thousands of people, innocent people, fleeing this violence in Aleppo, heading to the Turkish border, and then the Turkish leader saying, why should I have to take all of these additional refugees into my country? There could be security threats here. I don't know that I have the resources to deal with this. What can the United States do about a situation like that, which is only getting worse? We've already had hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions of people displaced.
Well, certainly the situation as it now stands is untenable. The ultimate solution, obviously, is to settle the conflict. And there have been efforts by the administration in that regard. Those have been complicated by the entrance of new people into the battle, like Russia. It's a difficult situation. Far
but is
more
the answer for
the
U.S. to get less involved or more involved?
Well, certainly more involved in terms of leadership. Whether we like it or not, we are the power that can bring people together. But that doesn't mean that we have thousands of troops, on the ground in Syria. In fact, I think that will likely be counterproductive. But we've got to provide the leadership and probably the plan that will put together some forces that can be on the ground. That's a difficult thing to do. The administration is working on it, but I can tell you it's a lot more difficult than perhaps some presidential candidates would have you believe.
No, it's definitely a terrible and difficult and complicated situation, but do you think that the U.S., in a way, has blood on its hands from inaction here?
Well, I do think it's no secret, and I'm not alone in this, that our drawing of a red line in Syria and then ignoring it has exacerbated the situation now, and has made it difficult for both our allies and our adversaries to either fear us or trust us. Having said that, had we gone ahead and had a military strike following that, I'm not convinced that would have settled the situation. So it's, like I said, it's more complicated than we like to state it is in campaigns.
That's Senator Jeff Flake, Republican from Arizona, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.